is 5 Live Sport.
Tuffers and Vaughan's Cricket Show.
Well, the India Test Series ended pretty badly for England with another heavy defeat in Ahmedabad. Coming up, we'll look back at the winter tests and assess where it leaves England for the rest of a hectic year. Michael, it all started so well. Where did it go wrong in the end?
Well, I just think India were far better. So much more skill in spinning conditions. But there were a few positives. The skipper, 794 runs across the 6 test matches at 6-6. Jack Leach is now England's number 1 spinner. That's a fact. And it was just a reminder of how great Jimmy Anderson is.
Absolutely. 3 wins, 3 defeats across the winter tests. Phil, do you think England, if you'd offered them that at the start of the series, would they have taken it?
I don't think they would. As Michael said, after such a good start, it all went horribly wrong. But I think they'll look back and they'll be thinking missed opportunities in India, but lots of work to do.
Well, we'll also preview the T20 series, which begins on Friday. And the head coach of England's women, Lisa Keightley, will join us after 2 white ball series wins in New Zealand.
Tuffers and Vaughan's Cricket Show
on 5 Live.
So, theoretically, guys, we could have been working yesterday, couldn't we? We could have been watching the final day of a thrilling test match, all boiling to a brilliant conclusion in Ahmedabad, but actually it was all over on Saturday. So what did you do with your unscheduled days off?
Well, we've had a few, haven't we, in the last 3 test matches? Yeah. The first test went to the 5th day, and then the third one went just into that 4th morning, but it was an early morning, and then obviously the day-night game was a 2-day and then a 3-day, so we've had a few days off. Phil, when you just give your little speech there and you said must improve, you sounded like my teacher at school.
Did I? Yes.
Yes.
Is that
pretty much every
to school
subject
for everybody?
Yes, every single subject. Yes, you're doing okay, but you can improve. Yeah, it sums it up, doesn't it? I mean, and it was disappointing. You're right, Phil, to say that, you know, they win the first 3 test matches, and you know, would you at the start of the winter say, "Oh, you'll take 3 out of 6"? You know, they probably would. You know, at the start, but once you win 3 and you win that first one so well, you've got to be thinking of at least winning 1 more. And it was just the manner. It was obviously, we've mentioned many times the rotation, the swapping and changing, but they were just outskilled. India are an outstanding team in those conditions. They've got great spinners. You know, they've got better batters that can cope with the spinning ball, and they've got some good seamers as well. And Virat Kohli, it was probably 3 days into the first test where Virat wasn't Virat. And all of a sudden, Virat Kohli thought, wait a minute, I'm not captaining like Virat captains. I better get back to the way that I captain. And from then on, pretty much that juggernaut started, and it was very, very difficult for England to stop.
The one thing that I do take from it is, though, as you said, our expectations were raised so much after that. Sri Lanka and the first win in India. And looking back, there were still opportunities, Mike, there, weren't there? I mean, we were saying that. I think we were on commentary, Ellie, at tea time, you know, on that last test match. You know, I think we only, you know, they were 60 behind, and England only needed 4 wickets. So it was there were times in all those kind of games. I know if you look at the record, it was beaten by 10 wickets and beaten by 300 runs. But there were times in those test matches that if it had just gone their way, it could have been a completely different kind of series. And if we'd have been sitting here now 2-2 after playing India away, I think it would have been a magnificent series. So there are positives for England there. They did get themselves in positions to win the Test series against India, but like it is in India, it's so difficult. It's so difficult to get across the line.
That first innings, 578 England scored, and they batted 190 overs. They didn't bat longer than 76 overs across the next 7 innings.
Yeah,
you know, they only went past 200 once in 7 times after that 578. And, you know, when you're getting bowled out for 112 in 49 overs, you're getting bowled out for 81 in 30 overs, 135 in 55 overs, 178 in 46 overs. There is the Test series. You know, if England can't find a way of batting long periods of time against better bowling in conditions that aren't flat, well, you know, you look at this summer with 2 against New Zealand, 5 against India, and obviously the Ashes. That is my one problem area with this Test match team, is when the bowling becomes high class. Have they got enough quality in the batting to bat that 120 overs in the first innings, 130 overs to get the 400, 450? That is a big question mark over this England Test match team.
It's a very difficult series, isn't it, India? It's almost like a Test match series in isolation. You know what I mean? Because you know, you can come back and then they'll all be opening the batting at Lords, and it'll be a little green seamer. balls won't be spinning and turning and going over your shoulder, so it's completely different. But Mike just read out those batting scores there. They'll be sitting there kicking themselves. It wasn't as if we needed to get 450. We just needed another 150 on a couple of occasions. If we'd have just got 250, 300, we would have probably gone on to win the Test matches.
Yeah, I mean, the scores weren't huge on either side, were they? I mean,
No.
Neither side could defend terribly well. You mentioned that final test, Phil, when England were on top at tea on that penultimate day, and then Rishabh Pant happened, and that just took it away from England completely. But apart from that 578 in the first innings for England in the first Test match, the highest score was 365 for India in the final Test match, and they didn't have to bat a second time.
No.
So
that was a problem.
It just shows, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the problem. We can talk on here and say, it was tight, it was close. They got hammered in the last three games. They got hammered. That's the fact.
Well,
and when it got tight, and when we were on the social thinking, wait a minute, this is England's moment. Tea time in that last game when Rishabh Pant and Washington Sundar are there. Within half an hour after tea, everyone was flat because they went, tactically they got it wrong. They put Besson. The skipper bowled himself. Should have bowled the best two bowlers from the morning session or the afternoon session. Probably Jack Leach, Jimmy Anderson. You kind of go back to that pink ball game. Parity-ish at halfway house inside the first over of the second innings. England lose 2 wickets. You went, oh no. So every time, and this is what good teams do, particularly in their own backyard. When that moment comes, and it's usually an hour in Test cricket, you've got to win that hour. India won that hour every single time in the last three Test matches, and they blew England away quickly.
Yeah, and also just throw in a couple of sort of iffy selections, perhaps, Mike, in those last two Test matches.
You could say that pink ball game, Phil, was. Cool. I'd use different words to iffy.
Well, I mean, in a way, the selections stitched up the bowlers hugely, didn't they? And for those two Test matches, because they were completely the wrong way round. But the batting is what let England down, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
your bowlers can only do what they can do, and if there are no 50 partnerships. So this is the staggering thing that after the first innings in the first Test, England didn't get a 50 partnership in the whole of the rest of the series.
Yeah, and I think it was 70 potential partnerships. They didn't get a 50-run partnership in potentially, I think it was, if my memory serves me right, 70 goes at it, which is just, you're not going to win a Test series like that. So there will be times, Chris Silverwood will be sitting on his sofa and Joe Root will be looking back and they'll sort of like dust themselves off and regroup and think, oh, crikey, O'Reilly, if we'd have just stitched together a bit of a batting performance. But as Mike said, we've been talking about this batting performances in first innings for a long time.
I mentioned, back to school. I'll give you, like the end of term report for the batting. I've got some numbers here. So Dom Sibley, 196 runs across 12 innings. Yes. Across the 6 games, average is 17.
Yeah.
Zach Crawley, 102 runs across 8 innings, an average of 12. Johnny Bairstow, 167 across 8 innings, an average of 23. He averaged 7 against India, having gone home to walk his dog to come back. Ben Stokes, 203 at an average of 25 across 8 innings. Ollie Pope, 153 at an average of 19 across 8 innings. Folk, 78 at 15 across 6. And the skipper, 794 at 66 across 12. I mean, those numbers are ridiculous when you think the skipper's got 794, and the next best is a young kid who's making his way, Dan Lawrence, who got 248 at 27. When you watch the way that Dan Lawrence came in and played in that last game, it wasn't an easy pitch, but for Dan Lawrence to get a 46 and a 50, it just proved to me that there were runs out there if you played the right way. And when he came out in the second innings, he played with so much skill. And I know we're celebrating an England player getting a 50, but that's what you do when you're getting hammered. You have to look at some positives. And what he's done is make the selection job for that first Test against New Zealand. And I'm praying that Rajasthan Royals don't get to the final of the IPL, because there'll be no Stokes, no Butler and no Jofra Archer in that first Test, which would be staggering. But Dan Lawrence, clearly now, with the way that he's played, must be eyeing up that 6 slot. He must be thinking, wait a minute, I've just got a 50 and a 46 in real tough conditions against some high-class spin. I know he's going to different conditions, but you've got to start with Dan Lawrence against New Zealand, Phil, haven't you?
Yeah, I think so. As you said, he came up and he looked quite at home, didn't he? He didn't look fazed by the spinning ball. I mean, listen, some of those pitches were tricky to play on. Let's not get it right, as the Indian batsman showed as well. But I was very impressed with Dan Lawrence. He just looked to have a bit of a game plan, didn't he? He didn't get phased. I think he was the one kind of England batsman who didn't get that look after that first Test match of rabbit in headlights a little bit with the spinning ball. He obviously, plays at Chelmsford, which turns a little bit, and he knows his way round his game. And he has a little chip down the wicket, hits over the top, looks to hit through mid-wicket, looks to play off the back foot and expose his stumps. He's got a bit of a game plan, but I was very impressed with him. And if just a few of the other guys could have managed to stitch together a bit of a series, it could have been so different.
Do you know what helped Dan Lawrence? Not playing in that pink ball game.
Perhaps, yeah.
He missed that game, and that pitch was atrocious.
Yeah,
it was atrocious for Test match cricket, and the pink ball was skidding on quicker than the red ball. Just having a game out. I mean, I've been so critical of the rotation, but sometimes when a young player gets taken out just for one game, and he gets a little bit lucky that he didn't have to bat on that kind of wicket, because he is a good player, but even he wouldn't have got too many runs against the pink ball, and that'd have been more baggage and more negativity. And will he have played in the kind of clear way that he did in the fourth Test if he'd have played in the pink ball game? But he looks a player, particularly against the spin. I haven't seen enough of him against seamers. We saw him when he went to number 3 and got LBW to Jasprit Bumrah for naught in that first Test match. So we haven't seen a great deal of him against seam, which he will have to face, obviously, from now. 2 against New Zealand, the 5 against India. The ball will be swinging and seaming around, and then obviously Australia. But against spin, of all the younger players, he played it the best.
Yep.
Do we have to look, because it doesn't feel like that long since we were saying, right, okay, England have, they've ditched what was happening under Trevor Bayliss, kind of go out and attack from the first ball. We've got players who can defend. We've got Burns, we've got Sibley, we've got Zach Crawley, got a double hundred not that long ago. Do we have to say, right, okay, we've got to go back to square one? Or are these players going to come good, do you think, back in English conditions and rebuild their places ahead of the Ashes? Or do we just say, what happened in India, as you say, Tuffers, was a complete anomaly?
I think you have to park it.
Yeah, you do. Don't forget it. Learn by your mistakes, and when if some of those guys are still lucky enough to be playing for England and their careers develop and everything, when they go back to India, they would have learned from that and learnt from the experience. But you have to move on, you have to park it and sort of think to yourself, Rory Burns, you would have think that he'll like to come back, Zach Crawley as well, and Dom Sibley, we know that they're sort of like, seam-orientated opening top 3 and sort of English conditions top 3. So they need to get rid of that bit of baggage and start afresh and again. But they can park it, but don't forget to learn from your experiences in that. India tour is such a wealth of experience that you take forward with you as an England cricketer, especially as a batsman. So I think Mike's right. As you say, it's sort of like, come on, boys, unlucky. We had some chances.
Well, the problem is,
don't forget that experience.
Yeah. And
learn by it as well. Got to learn from it, Mike, haven't you?
Yeah, 2016 England got blown away 4-0 in India. And we were saying exactly the same thing, saying you've got to learn for it for the next time. But the problem with the next time that they've been, which has just been now, there wasn't many from 2016 still in the team.
No,
I mean, Joe Root, Ben
right.
Stokes, Hasib Hamid was in the team back then. So, what it has done is made that first 2 games against New Zealand so important for individual players. Because I think you're right. I think it will be Sibley, Burns and Crawley in the top 3 to go back to English conditions, the way that they'd like to play with 3 openers, if you like, in the top 3. I understand that. But by failing so badly, all of them, it really does make it difficult as an opening batter, number 3, because the ball will move around in June. You may be up against Trent Bolt, Wagner, Southey, high-class Test match bowlers. And that it'll be a different kind of mental challenge, that you're not facing a left-arm spinner for the first ball, when you're opening the bat, and you're facing a left-arm swing bowler that might be hooping them back into the pads or taking them away from you with 3 or 4 slips and a gully. So it has put them under pressure that if you suddenly failed a couple of times in that first Test, well, the selectors will start looking. They really will. And that's why I think in county cricket, April and May, it's a great chance for any player, really. Any player that's on the radar. England like to pick players that have been in the system. So any of those younger players that's been in the system with the Pathways, with the Lions, training at Loughborough, inside the bubble, because they've been taking quite big squads. So James Bracey will be one that, if he starts the season well at Gloucester, I'm sure they'll be having a little look at him. Anyone comes and goes 3 or 4 early first-class hundreds, they're going to get a chance of playing for England this summer.
Yeah, and so they should.
Okay.
And so they should.
Yeah. Well, I mean, June at Lords is going to feel very, very, very different from February in Ahmedabad, isn't it? Let's face it.
Yes.
That's the obvious thing to say. And then December
Hope
in
it's a similar
Brisbane will feel very,
temperature.
very different again. We're going to try and get you to think about who you might put in your team for that first test at the Gabba. I'm asking you to think a long way ahead, but this is the tricky one. So look, let's talk then about rotation. It's the R word. It's the word you hate, Michael. You've said you've made your views on this programme known about your view of rotation. But according to Chris Silverwood, it's here to stay. And he actually suggested, Chris Silverwood, that players could be rotated even during the Ashes in December.
The rotation system, I mean, I'm happy with that. You look at the amount of cricket that we've played and the amount of cricket we've got in front of us. We've got to be proactive in looking after our players and making sure that we keep them as fresh as possible, so we can keep them going as long as possible as well. When we talk about working his way to the Ashes, I want the squad to arrive there in fit form, both physically and mentally, to be honest. Because again, that's going to be a tough tour. We know that, and it's one that obviously we're prioritising. So I want to make sure that everybody arrives at that point in as good a place as possible. So we have to look after our players. We're trying to grow a group of players here, but we can put a strong side out all the time. But we have to again be aware that we have to look after our players. There is a whole load of cricket coming up this summer. Then we'll very quickly disappear abroad once our summer is finished. So we've got to make sure we're proactive in looking after our players.
But so players could be flying home from the Ashes sort of midway or whatever, like they have on this tour.
Well, we've got to be proactive in looking after them. So it's certainly something we may have to look at. Yeah.
Wow.
Right. Well, we know about rotating during the summer, but
Ellie,
flying players in and out during the Ashes, that's not
Ellie,
going
I'll
to
state
work, surely.
now, if England can't manage their players, you took the mick out of me a little bit about I've been the kind of victim elder of the rotating kind of policy. I've made it very clear that you get your players right for the big series, for the big moments and the best teams. And that was my point in India. 2 in Sri Lanka could easily have rested. The one-day series T20 can easily have rested. 4 tests against India, for me, has been the most important part of the winter, and they haven't done that. Now we accept that and we move on. Now, if we get to Australia and England haven't managed their players well enough to get the rest before you get to an Ashes to make sure that you've got your best players available for every single Ashes test match, if that's not possible, Ellie, I'm afraid test match cricket is dead.
Doomed.
Absolutely dead. If you can't manage your system to make sure that every single player, if they need rest, you get it beforehand. You might have to miss a series against India if that has to happen. I'd be totally against that as well. But if that has to happen, because when you arrive in Australia, you have to have your best squad available, and every player that's deemed good enough to represent England at Test match cricket in Australia must be available for the 5 Test matches.
Yeah.
So does that mean that some players not playing in the World T20, Michael, who you'd expect? So do you take Ben Stokes? Do you take Jofra Archer? Do you take Jos Buttler out of that World T20 squad?
Well, Ellie, if you said to me now, okay, Jos Buttler's struggling and he may only be able to play one of those 2 series, the T20 World Cup or the Ashes, there'll be people out there saying, well, T20 is very important. Of course it is, but I would hate to think that the Ashes come second. I would hate to think that we're in an era where the Ashes comes behind a T20 World Cup. I don't think that'll be the case. I think England will manage the players to make sure that that's not the case. And there aren't that many in the T20. There's Jofra, there's Ben Stokes, Johnny Bairstow, if he's in the test. I don't think he will be by then. Ben Stokes, Jofra Archer, not many others. I mean, Chris Woakes hasn't been in the T20 squad. You think he's going to obviously come back into the test fold. So I don't think there are that many other than those 3. But this is where it gets frustrating for England supporters, is that, and I think many in the game, that these players will go and play the full IPL. Yet we're already hearing the coach of the England cricket team saying that potentially in the Ashes we might not have our best team. I can't accept that, Ellie. No. I really can't.
No. I'm worried. I'm actually worried for Test cricket a little bit, if this is the case. If we turn up to Lords, well, it could be the case. And as you say, there's no Archer, no Stokes, no Buttler. And then we're thinking about flying people into Australia. The whole point of going on a tour for when I sort of played anyway was that, the whole squad, you're ready, you're all involved, you're all invested in this tour to Australia, all facing the right way on the coach, all sort of, all together, all plans are in, you don't pop in and pop out to an Ashes tour down under. You don't have a game off and a game on and fly home and have a couple of weeks at home. You just don't do that. It doesn't work, and it won't work. And if that is the case, and we then start having people not turning up for Lord's Test matches against the number one team in the world.
Josh Buttler today's did an interview, Phil. And he said he didn't realise that was the case. He said it's the ECB that made that decision, not the players.
And we should say, so the New Zealand Test matches were put in the diary after the IPL dates were all in place, weren't they? So there was a late addition to the programme, wasn't it? But
that's what I mean. Josh Buttler stated today that he was surprised by what he'd heard, and the ECB have made that decision. It's not that the players have gone banging down the door of the ECB manager saying, we want to play the full IPL. I think in their minds, they were probably thinking and speaking to their franchises once those 2 test matches were put in the schedule, we're probably not going to be around for the qualification period of the IPL in the finals. There's a week-long, finals where you get the, I think it's the 5th team and the 4th team play and et cetera, and you get to the final. It goes on for about 8 days. I think the players were expecting that they'd be called back to play for their country if selected. So I think they've been surprised by it as well. But I think it's an ECB decision.
Well, I think they need to be very, very careful, and I think Test cricket needs to be very, very careful as well. It really, really does, because then all of a sudden you're just chipping away at the game of Test cricket, which is always meant to be the pinnacle. We've banged on about this all the time. And if people are flying in and listen, I agree with the rotational policy of a squad sometimes when you're in Australia. If you've had 2 Test matches and there's the likes of Stone and Woke's been sitting on the sideline, you might have a different 3 or a different 4-seamers who are going to be playing because you're going to take someone out for a rest or what have you. Jimmy Anderson might look to play all 5. So I understand the rotation of the seam bowlers within the squad that is in Australia, but I'm not having people flying to and fro. But it's
like I heard.
I can't believe that's going to happen. Surely,
no, it can't. It can't be right, Elliot. It cannot be right, and no, they can't go through with that. I heard the other day them saying, we're trying to grow as big a squad as possible. Well, I get that. But surely when you get to the big series, that's when you go, right, we've tried all these players out. Now it's the big series. What is our best team?
Hold on a minute. Western rotation is something you rest and rotate for then you're working towards why you have been rested and rotated, haven't you? You're working towards the Australia trip. If you've then rested and rotated and then you're then rested for the thing that you've been rested for, well, I don't understand.
I'm going to sit in my garden a lot. I said about the New Zealand series, if they play in the IPL final over a test match at Lord's, I'm sitting in my garden. I ain't going to Australia if they're going to rotate.
No, it's going to be like watching a second
It's ridiculous. Test match cricket's becoming a joke if that happens.
Yeah, well, it's not going to happen, is it? We know, as you say, Tuffers, there's no point in rotating, once you've actually reached the thing that the whole point of the rotation was for.
Yeah, I'm glad you put it better than I did.
They forgot they were rotating for that moment. Oh, we forgot. We're still rotating.
The alternative, the question of big squads is a different one, isn't it? And you can say, right, you're not just got your core squad, you've got a bigger squad, because if people get ill, and look what happened to India and Australia. They had a big squad and they used a lot of those squad players. People like, Washington Sundar wasn't supposed to be part of the team, was he? Because India had so many injuries.
See, Ellie,
and people who had to go home.
This is the plan. This is the plan they've seen. The way to win in Australia is to be absolutely a schmozzle. Everyone gets injured. You have to draw upon your 25th player who hasn't got a clue he's playing on the morning of the match, never played before in his life, and there you go. You go and win a series. That was a one-off. I don't see that happening. I don't see that's a great way of planning. India have got a magnificent squad of players, and that's been proven. England have got a magnificent squad of white ball players. They don't have a magnificent squad of test match players. That's a fact. They don't have a good enough batting unit to swap and change, manoeuvre the order. For 7 test matches in the summer, I beg them to just try and pick the best team they possibly can every single test to get players used to playing with each other. Partnerships,
right.
It's the key.
Who is your ideal England team, both of you, for that first test at the Gabba? Whenever that is, probably
I've
in
got
December.
Gucci going in one.
Marcus
We haven't got.
Trescott,
We had the
3.
TARDIS, didn't we, during the cricket social, where we were going back and we were picking Wally Hammond.
I've seen Kevin
and,
Peterson get a few on the telly today in India for the old legends. He could do a job at.
Did he do all right?
I've got it very. I've got Sibley, Burns, and Crawley because I think against the quicker bowlers, it's a big summer for them all. But at this stage, I don't see anyone, jumping over them just yet. Root and Stokes at 4 and 5. I've got Pope or Lawrence at 6. Butler at 7. I've got Wokes at 8. And I say that, and he'd have been crucial in that last Test match in India because they were desperate for someone to bowl a bit more seam but bat. And I mean, England left themselves so light with the batting with that pink ball game. With Joffre coming at number 8, I've got Archer at number 9, Leach at 10, and at 11, Anderson or Broad. That's my starting 11 for Brisbane.
Yeah, and then you've got the likes of Ollie Stone and Mark Wood for that sort of rotation. That if the guys have had a really big Test match or a couple of big Test matches, got a load of overs under their belts and are feeling a bit tired, you've then still got the likes of Stone, who was impressed in India, didn't he? Bowled very, very well. Looks like he's a talent. Lovely action. Looks like he can hold a line and a length as well, and would, if anything, look to bowl better in Australian conditions. So he's going to be someone who comes into the equation, and we know what Mark Wood can do.
The reminder for England in the 4th Test match was a little bit of what they couldn't do in Australia the last time round. They had Australia many times 5 down for 150, and then all of a sudden the tail would wag. And that Washington Sundar Rishabh Pant partnership, it was a little bit of a reminder for me that wait a minute, England, you've just got to make sure that you have bowlers that are still fresh and firing when the tail come in, because that extra bit of pace, a Mark Wood or a Jofra Archer bowling 90 odd miles an hour, that's what tailenders don't want to face. They haven't got a mystery spinner, they don't have a Ravi Ashwin, they don't have a Muralithan. So Jack Leach will just be holding an end in Australia, just trying to toil away, might get a bit of foothold in the second innings, and that'll only come if England bat really well. But they will need that little bit of pace to blow the tail away, because tail end runs in Australia, as has been proven the case, as was proven the case with the Indian win in Brisbane. Washington Sundar and Axar Patel batting so well. That was just a little bit of a reminder to me that England overseas against the better teams have always struggled to get rid of the tail.
I think also as well, we're talking about Sibley, Burns and Crawley, and I think we will be until we all get to Australia. I think that the Australian wickets will probably suit their game a lot more. Sibley, looks to play for his off stump, looks to leave on length outside the off stump. Burns had a very good series against the likes of Cummins and Stark, didn't he, over here? So he'll have that experience against him. And as same with Crawley, big tall player, looks to play off the back foot and can cope with that bouncing delivery that they're going to get. So, we were talking about that 3 had a bit of a stinker in India. I think they have the opportunity to actually put it all right for that Australian series on those kind of specific pitches.
Before we move on, some sad news that has broken this evening. The former England, Warwickshire and Surrey fast bowler Joey Benjamin has died today at the age of 60. He played just one Test for England against South Africa at the Oval in 1994 and was part of the Ashes squad for that winter's series in Australia. And Phil, you also went on that tour. Yeah. What are your memories of Joey Benjamin?
Well, I mean, he's a great lad. He had a great smile as well. He was great for the sort of dressing room. Loved his cricket, and it was so unfortunate. He got very, very poorly at the start of that Ashes trip. I think he got chicken pox or something, and didn't really feature. But so we didn't see sort of like too much of him. But I can remember playing against him for Surrey and for Warwickshire as well. And some very, very sad news. As I say, I can just remember that smile of his. He always used to walk in and go, "All right, Tuffers, man, how are you, mate?" You know what I mean? And very, very sad news. And
I tell you what, Phil,
go to all his family and everything.
He could really bowl.
Yeah, and he could really bowl. I mean, lovely cricketer.
Fantastic swing bowler, decent pace. I played a couple of times against him for Yorkshire as a young whippersnapper, and I always remember I did okay against him. I think it was at Middlesbrough, and he was the first. I remember the dressing rooms were very short distance from it, very short square, and I kind of got off, and he ran in. It was in the days where there was two dressing rooms, two Yorkshire dressing rooms, and he came to find me and shook my hand and said, "Well played, young man. I think you've got a chance in this game." I always remember that big gleaming smile, even though I'd played nicely against him. He was a really, really nice guy, and he's going to be sadly missed.
Yeah, whippy, a little bit skiddy as well, and bowled beautifully. I was left out, I think, for the game that he did play at the Oval. Wasn't that when Devon got all the wickets.
Well, he got 9, didn't he, in the second innings against South Africa?
That's right. That's
and
right.
Joey Benjamin
And so,
got 4 for 42, I think, in the first innings. So
that's right.
You know, so he made his mark just in that one Test match. And as you say, Tuffers, you know, going to Australia, if he hadn't got ill, if he hadn't got chickenpox, then he might have had the chance to feature more, and who knows where he would have carried on
sad
to.
news.
But
He was a
but
top man,
it's just
Joey.
kind of the warmth, isn't it, of the tributes that have been paid to him from the
He was
cricket
a lovely
community.
bloke.
Yeah.
Yep.
And as Tuffer says, of course, our deep sympathies to his family and friends, remembering Joey Benjamin. Well, look, let's go back to the India tour. And the one-day side steps up now. The Test series is finished. All starts on Friday with the first of 5 T20s, followed by a 3-match 50-over series. In effect, the start of preparation for the T20 World Cup, which is scheduled to take place in India in October. So, do you think we'll learn quite a lot about that T20 World Cup from what we're going to see over the next week or so, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, England got to the final of the T20 World Cup last time in India. Played some great cricket, just knew how to win the big moments, and obviously the final, our friend Carlos dispatched Ben Stokes into the stands on those few occasions in the last over. But I don't know how much they'll learn. I think they'll take a lot from playing against big crowds. You know, if the crowds are allowed in Ahmedabad, I think the noise, I think that's very important, the kind of atmosphere that you're going to play in. But you're just never quite sure what the pitches are going to be. I think that's what the key will be for England in this series, will be to read the pitch and try and, you know, they play such an expansive game and they try and climb into 180, 200 if they possibly can. But, you know, in India, sometimes 160 is enough. And it's having the skills and the awareness of making sure that you get a good score if you're batting first, rather than thinking all the time that you have to get the 200s. Because, you know, you look at the IPL, I know it wasn't in India this time round, but, you know, over the course of the years that I've watched the IPL, is that sometimes 150 wins you games in India because the pitches do deteriorate and they take a bit more spin. The cutters come into play for the seam bowlers. So I think over the 5 matches, it's assessing the pitch and the conditions. I think that's what England have got to get really good at. They're a fantastic white ball team, but to win in all parts of the world and to win a World Cup in India, you will come across different surfaces. So this is a perfect chance to kind of read the game, read the situation, get your teams right, get your formation right. I think it'll be a really tight series. But I said last week about India, for me, they should be the best cricket team in the world with everything that they've got. And they've never won a T20 World Cup. They've won the 50-over World Cup in their own backyard. Those famous scenes many years ago with Sachin and co. In Mumbai. Virat will fancy his chances with the World Cup being in India in a few months' time. Surely he'll fancy his chances with the IPL, everything that goes around it. They could be in for some year. Winning in Australia, beating England already. They've got England away, and then obviously the T20 World Cup. It could be a special year for Indian cricket.
Yeah. It's just perfect preparation for England, isn't it? I mean, it's just doesn't drop any better for them, doesn't it? I mean, this white ball side now that England have got, you know, they really are pretty experienced guys now. So I don't think there are going to be too many sort of like things that are going to shock them, or sort of like, you know, they don't quite know how to handle. They're a pretty well-oiled machine, and so I just see these T20s and one day as just little fine fettling, you know, just a little bit of tinkering, just, you know, using things to get, you know, everything absolutely spot on. And as Mike said, you know, sometimes the one thing that England have just got to be a little bit guarded about is that sometimes just stay in the game a little bit in India, because as we saw in the Test match series, things seem to happen very, very quickly. And as you say, 150, 160 can sometimes be a decent score, you know. So I think it's just about pulling all these things and all the experience out of it and putting it into practice later on.
And we talk about the stability of the Test team, which obviously is, you know, well, it kind of a bit more stable maybe than we were thinking after this Indian series. But Owen Morgan, really interesting piece in the Times today, suggested that he's expecting not to have his strongest 11 for quite a large part of this year. And he said, I think this is the only time, bar the World Cup this year, that I'm going to have a full-strength T20 team available. There are other occasions where other formats will take priority.
Yeah.
So
We'll
that's quite an interesting one, isn't it? So he's acknowledging again that there's so much to pack in this year.
make the most of it, get all the guys together, get them knowing what their roles are and all the things that they've got to do and what parts they've all got to play. So make the most of it, because as we know, with the situation, it is a little bit tricky to get everyone together all the time, just with the amount of cricket.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at tours to Pakistan and Bangladesh potentially at the end of the English summer. I can't see England are going to take the full strength team to both those places, with the World Cup and obviously the Ashes to follow. In the summer, I'm sure he'll get a full team. He had it in South Africa. He's got it again here in India. By those comments, it suggests that England may be at full strength for the Test series against India. We'll have to wait and see. It's the rotation.
Yes, who knows?
We'll learn to love it in the end.
What was that? It was like at the old fun fairs, wasn't it? The big spinning wheel. You sort of like you turn the wheel and just see where you end up. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe that's the way they should pick the team.
Yeah, perhaps.
Like a big tombola.
Yes,
pick your name out. And one other thing that kind of caught my eye out of this interview in the Times today was Owen Morgan maybe just opening the door a chink to Alex Hales being involved in the white ball squad this summer. Yeah. He said, my view on that has always been that the trust that Alex has lost will take time to rebuild. There is a chance that he might be around the group and that opportunity might be there. And actually, he kind of said that possibly last summer, without COVID, they could have just started to reintegrate Alex Hales a little bit into the squad, but because of the restrictions, that wasn't possible to happen. But let's just have a quick listen to this. This is what Joss Butler had to say about a potential return for Alex Hales.
I'd be fine with that. I think we're all disappointed with how that episode played out, and as Owen's talked about a lot of the time, it's an element of trust needs to be rebuilt, and I know he said that it's harder to do that obviously in this day and age at the moment. It's hard to get people in and out of teams and of environments, so that hasn't taken place. But I'm sure when the time's right, Owen will talk to Alex and the selectors, of course. We all know what a brilliant player he is. So if he can be reintegrated into the side and playing well and warrant selection, then all for that. I think everyone's pretty grown up, and I'm sure if there were ill feelings, that nothing that couldn't be sorted out with some man-to-man conversations, I'm sure. So I think the white ball side's been together for a long time. Alex was a huge part of that for a long time as well, and I'm sure lots of the guys stay in close touch with him. So I don't foresee there being problems, and if there were, then could be sorted out. But as Owen said for a long time, that trust needs to be rebuilt, and I'm sure that those two guys will have a conversation when the time's right.
What do you think? Should he be reintegrated, Tuffers?
Fabulous player, and what he's done, we all know he was a naughty boy, and he shot himself a bit in the foot, didn't he? But so what do you do?
It was two failed tests, wasn't it? That was the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't quite understand all this. I mean, I understood it at the time, but I mean, I don't think that's the end of the story for Alex Hales. And what do? You go round the world playing in all these leagues, the PSL and the Big Bash and everything, and you do wonderful things over there. So that's all you can do. You can go out there and get consistent, solid performances, score big runs, and knock down the door. And then you can just sort of go, well, hold on a minute. Why now? Why now? We need the conversation, because otherwise it's looking a little bit unfair. But I mean, just listening there to Joss Butler, what a brilliant player he is. I mean, crikey, he's a world-class T20 and white ball cricketer, as his stats showed, and I'd be very surprised if he's not reintegrated or rotated or whatever.
I'm surprised. I mean, I thought he was done and dusted, under Owen Morgan's leadership. And by them coming out and saying...
But that would be wrong, though, Mike, as well,
absolutely
wouldn't it?
Wrong, yeah. So yeah. I would say that they've probably missed the best opportunity to, reinstigate him, would have been this tour, to take him to India. You're behind closed doors, there's not a lot happening. What a great way it would have been for Alex Hales to be a part of the group. All you're doing is spending time in a hotel. There's no lights for you to go and try and challenge yourself with at night. You're not allowed to do anything like that. So I thought if they were thinking about bringing him back in, and it did surprise me today when I heard that. Now I've heard that, I think, well, why don't you just take him to India?
It'd be interesting to know where you'd put him in the team, though. Michael, because you look at Roy Bairstow, World Cup winning opening team from the 50 over game. You've got David Milan, number one T20 batsman in the world. You've got Jos Buttler, you've got Owen Morgan, you've got Ben Stokes. So, is there a danger that he will have missed the boat?
Yeah, there's that danger. Jason Roy could do with a few runs at the top of the order. I think there's still a slight question mark over Jason Roy against spin. The World Cup and these 5 T20, obviously there's going to be plenty of spin on option, particularly against the opening batsman. That's what they'll start with, left arm spin. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Axar Patel, actually. I wouldn't be surprised if he's taken the new ball again in the T20 in the T20 series. So I do think there's a small window at the top of the order. Johnny Bairstow's had to move in the middle. And that surprised me, but the Buttler situation is the one that that England will stick with him at the top. But I just look at the way Buttler plays in the middle. There's not many players can do what he can do in the middle of the innings, but there's lots of players that can do what he does at the top, if you know what I mean. There's lots of the Hales, Roy, Bairstow. They can all bat in the top two, but there's not many, I don't think, that could come in against a spinning ball and play all the ramps, the tricks, the flicks, the reverses, like Jos Buttler. But that's the way they're going. I don't think that'll change now. I think Buttler will stay at the top of the order. So basically, Alex Hales is vying for one spot. That's that next one next to him.
Yeah, but it's also just about being around in the squad, having that depth in your squad, isn't it? Pushing people for places, pushing performances up and up and up and up, because there's someone lurking around there, sort of like on the 12th man's bench, so to speak, that can slot in if you just if you're not on the top of your game, and that's what just pushes people on to winning series, pushing people on to winning competitions as well. So I think it would be good to see him back, and everyone deserves a second chance.